Welcome to this new class. This is a world history class, and we're going to be looking at the definition of history. More than one definition. Definition by different authorities. Let us pause a prayer. Father, thank you for today. Thank you for your goodness, your mercy, your truth. I bless you, Lord. There's none like you, and there's none but you. There's no God but you. The other gods are creatures. You are supreme and you are sovereign. And I am your servant. I am in your hands. I'm doing this because I believe you have called me to do it. So I'm doing it in your name and in your authority. I pray you guide me and lead me and direct me and bless the participants in this course. And I pray you bless, protect, cover and keep the systems that are involved. In your precious name I pray. Amen. Praise the Lord. Now, we'll be doing World Civilizations or World History 1 and World History 2. I won't be able to go in depth in any particular video. A video represents 1 hour because even though you will not be sitting in for the entire hour, the practical that you get to do will make and in fact it will take you over an hour. And it's a 3-credit course, and therefore you're going to have to do 36 videos in order to qualify for the 3 credit. You'll get a lot of work to do. Reading right through. You're going to be doing reflection on each video. You're going to listen to each video, and you're going to write the essence of the video and email it to me. From time to time, I'll say, look up this and look up that, and include it in the reflection paper. The videos are worth 50% of the course grade. And you're going to be getting 2 essays to do. I will not give you the topics yet. I'll give you about 4 or 5 topics and you choose from them. You get, and that will constitute 50% of your grades. We are using APA style. APA style. History generally is MLA, but MLA now resembles APA. So much so that I just use APA. MLA resembles that they're doing in-text citation. Generally, they would do footnotes or formally footnotes or endnotes and works cited. No, they're doing work. They do work cited, but they're doing in-text citation like APA, which I have written to them and I've informed them because I'm a member of the club that I didn't think they should change. Chicago, and you are going to do a course in what I'm talking about, a course known as academic writing. Chicago is one of the courses, is one of the writing manuals that you're going to be looking at. But that one resembles MLA. All right. Anyway, history, because history is widely used. It is used in an everyday language, and it is so widely misused. What is history? I'm going to give you, and this is a definition that will guide this course. This definition I'm going to give you. So study it and know it in your head and practice it. So according to this author, Stephen Davies, you can Google him. He's a professor. And history is defined in his book, Theory and History. empiricism and history. Theory and history, empiricism and history. As a systematic, evidence-based study of the human past, full stop, not the past itself. So when people talk about Jamaica is making history, or repeating history, or the world is repeating history, or history is in the making, and this is the history of the history of or this is a person's medical history. That is really rubbish, you know. It's poetic and it sounds nice, but it's not history. The same way when people talk about the setting sun and the rising of the sun, it's poetry. It's not science because the sun doesn't set, the sun doesn't rise. So that's not history. History is not something that you repeat, or it is a written work. History is a written work, and I'm going to be looking at some other definitions. And I'm looking here in a book, Christianity Through the Centuries, A History of the Christian Church, by Dr. Earl E. Cairns, Cairns. And it says, the German noun Geschichte, a form of the verb Geschehen, and I don't speak German, right? So don't knock me for not pronouncing it properly. But Geschehen, which means to happen, refers to history as event rather than as a process or a product. That is a German word. Thus, history may be defined first as an incident, an actual event or happening in time and space as a result of human action. History is not related, it relates to human action. Okay, that is one source. Such an incident is absolute and objective and can be known only directly and fully by God. Such history cannot be exactly repeated later in another place. Again, so when they say that history, this place, US or Mexico or wherever, is repeating history, not even in the German definition, which I don't really go by, can history repeat itself? Information about an incident is a second meaning for the word history. Information. This usually indirect information about the past may be in the form of a document or objective relating to the incident. Unlike the scientist who can study his material objectively and directly, the historian is subjectively limited because he is a part of what he studies and has to take God's action in time and space into account, consider man's role in history as a free will agent, and realize his data is indirect. Alright, let us look at the English word for history. The English word for history came from the Greek word historia, which is derived from the Greek verb histore. This word was used by the Attic Greeks and originally meant to learn by inquiry or investigation. You see the difference? It has to do with learning by inquiring, making inquiry, or to investigate. The word was used by Paul in Galatians 1:18 to describe his interview with Peter in Jerusalem. This leads to a third meaning of history as inquiry or research, to check as well as find the data about the past. You have to check, and you're talking about a particular, and the past is a sea. So you can write about the sea in this sense. You're going to write about incidents that have taken place, that have gone down into this great sea. This historian tests the authenticity. This historian tests the authenticity, genuineness, and integrity of the information by a careful study of the background and text of his material or the person who is being interviewed. A historian of note would not interview someone who is not of a sound mind, or one who is a drunkard, or one who is a known liar, or one who doesn't have reputation. Because he's doing everything to make sure that the information he collects and passes on is genuine and objective. Valid inductions can also be developed as the scholar sees patterns objectively appearing in his material. Patterns. Inductions, that means you start from the general and come to the specific. That's what inductive study means. Unlike induction, we start from the specific and make a general statement. The historian who thus far seeks answers to such questions as who, or what, and when, and where, must then consider the question why or the meaning of his data. It's amazing. Knowledge is really interlocking, because as many fields as possible ask the same questions. Hermeneutics, theology, the very Bible itself is the core of theology, but the Bible, history, journalism, who, what, when, where, how, why. These are questions you ask, and so on, in order to arrive at an objective position or information. The Greeks who used the word historikos as another term of history thought of history in this sense as the product of inquiry. It's a product. So history is a product. History is not the past. It is a product of an incident or happening in the past. It could be a week ago, that's past. A day ago would be past. 10 years ago, 50 years ago, 1,000 years ago. Because this is church history, and he's writing about events that took place 2,000 plus years ago. We are going to be doing world history, and that is going to take us to periods before written work was done. The past. Looking at how people have lived, how they have behaved, how they have interacted in the past. So it has to do with inquiry into the past. And this inquiry has to be evidence-based. You don't imagine the past. You investigate it. Written records. You go into the library, you go into the archives, and you look at data collected on certain events and happenings, and you may need to compare them too, because more than one person might have done the investigation and might well come up with information that differ, and some will include certain details. Some people are more detailed than some. So one, you need to compare information. Very important. Very, very important. We're talking about history. This suggests interpretation as fourth meaning for history. You have to interpret the data. This is a subjective reconstruction of the past in the light of the data, the historian's own biases, as well as the climate of opinion of his time, and the element of freedom of the human will. Such reconstruction can never fully tell the past as it was, but must be partial, subject to error and human bias. And that is why you need to consult more than one sources. Because historians are humans and they do have the biases. And they become tired too when I leave this out. I might not consider this important, this detail, and so on. A consensus that the past will emerge. However, as historians check one another's work, students in classes usually study history of this type. Although absolute truths about the past may elude the historian, he will, as far as his information permits, present truth about the past objectively and impartially. From this discussion, the student will be aware that history may be event or incident, information, inquiry, or process, and product or interpretation. History as event is absolute, occurring only once in time and space. But history as information, inquiry, and interpretation is relative and subject to change. The event is not going to repeat itself, but the interpretation of the event is subject to change. Somebody else will come and do further investigation, more in depth or wider investigation, and project or present that incident in a different light. Same incident, but based on his research and information, it is presented in a different way. So history may be interpreted as the interpreted record of the socially significant human past. You can study this one too. History may be defined as the interpreted record of the socially significant human past, based on organized data collected by the scientific method from archaeology, literary, or living sources. The church historian must be just as impartial in his collection of the data of history as a secular historian is, even though the church historian recognizes the fact that neither of them will be neutral to the data, but each will approach the material with a framework of interpretation. So, saying I'm not doing church history, I won't go any further in because is coming down now to church history, what it should be and the approach that should take, and so on. I'm just dealing with the principle of history. The principle. That's the principle of history. So, don't listen when you hear people on the radio or wherever, politicians, talking about history is in the making, history is being repeated, and things like that. History is a product of, or it is a systematic evidence-based study of the human past. Now we are going to look at the preface of the book, our main text. Our main text. It says, when we began to work on this book, the main text was produced by 4 professors. Peter N. Stearns, Michael Adas, Stuart B. Squats, Schwartz, Mark Jason Gilbert, MARC, Jason Gilbert. 4 different professors produced it. So it says here, when we began to work on the first edition of World Civilizations, and the book is the global experience in the early 1990s, we did so out of the conviction that it was time for a world history textbook truly global in its approach and coverage, and yet manageable and accessible for today's college students. Our commitment to that goal continues with this 3rd edition. Several decades of scholarship in world history and in area studies by historians and other social scientists have yielded a wealth of information and interpretive generalizations. The two principal distinguishing characteristics of this book are its global orientation and its analytic emphasis. This is a true world history textbook. It deals seriously with the Western tradition but does not award it pride of place or preeminence that distinguishes other or diminishes other areas of the world. World Civilization, the Global Experience, examines the histories of all areas of the world and all peoples according to their growing or waning importance, which is good. He's saying they try to be as objective as they possibly can, which is important. It also considers what happened across regions by examining cross civilizational developments such as migration, and this is what generates or this activity, human activity, gives birth to this activity gives birth to new languages as people move and join up with other groups. So it deals with migration, trade, the spread of religion, disease, plant exchange, and cultural interchange. Civilizations or societies sometimes slighted in world history textbook, such as the nomadic societies of Asia, Latin American societies, the nations of the Pacific Rim, and the societies of non-urban sedentary peoples receive attention here. Many world history textbooks function as factual compendia, leaving analytic challenge to the classroom. This text pays a great deal of attention to periodization, an essential requirement for coherent presentation. World Civilization, the Global Experience, identifies 6 periods in world history, each period determined by 3 basic criteria. A. Geographical rebalancing among major civilizational areas, an increase in the intensity and extent of contact across civilizations, or in the case of the earliest period, cross-regional contact, and the emergence of new and roughly parallel developments in most, if not all, of these major civilizations. The book is divided into 6 parts, and we will see them as we go along, the 6 different parts. There are certain themes that the book covers. We have tried to make world history accessible to today's students by using several themes as filters for the vast body of information that constitutes the subject. These themes provide a perspective and framework for understanding where we have come from, where we are now, and where we might be heading. So, commonalities among societies. World Civilization, the Global Experience, traces several key features of all societies. It looks at the technologies people have developed. For humans, were tool-making animals from an early date, and at the impact of technology on the physical environment. It examines social organization, including the inequities between the 2 genders and different social classes, and it discusses the role of human agency, how individuals have shaped historical forces. These 3 areas, technology and the environment, inequalities and reactions to inequalities, and human agency, are 3 filters through which to examine any human society. So we'll look at it again. These 3 areas: 1, technology and the environment, inequalities and reactions to inequalities, and human agency, are 3 filters through which to examine any human society. If you want to know how developed a society is, you need to know about its science and technology. You need to understand its political philosophy, and which will inform its economic programs and approaches to solving human ills. And you'll need to know of an understanding of its population, the people, its citizens. Large regional units that define aspects of economic exchange, political institutions, and cultural values began to spring up more than 5,000 years ago. I read it again. Large regional units that defined aspects of economic exchange, political institutions, and cultural values began to spring up more than 5,000 years ago. These civilizations, that is, societies that generate and use an economic surplus beyond basic survival needs. I mean, they have found ways to preserve the surpluses because some of the food items are seasonal. So they would have to find ways to preserve the food item, the surpluses, feed the people are satisfied, the people have enough. If it is sugar, peas, whatever, rice, flour, you have enough for your population. You're going to exchange or sell the same thing, the surplus to other nations. And the other nation might be in a, they might be producing cars. And the workers need food, and the population need food to eat. Or they might be producing aircraft or ships, or whatever. But you need some of what their surpluses, they need your surpluses, and the other person need their surpluses, and so we interchange and exchange and survive. What leads to a society producing enough to feed itself and also generating enough surpluses to pass on to other societies that need those surpluses and need to you need some of their surpluses and they need some of yours. What leads to that? Technology and science created a general framework for the lives of most people ever since, but different regions had a variety of contacts involving migration, trade, religious missionaries, exchanges of diseases and plants, and wars. Formal relations between societies, what we now call international relations, also were organized. The features in world civilization's global experience have been carefully constructed and honed over the course of 3 editions. Our aim has been to provide students with tools to help them learn how to analyze change and continuity. Mhm. Which is very, very important. Very important that students be able to understand that and do that. The History is such an interesting study, and some people claim they do not love history. They have no tolerance for it, no taste for it. One historian has said, this professor, I can't remember his name now, of the University of the West Indies, has said, he who has no knowledge of his past, or the past, not his personal past, no knowledge of the past, has no awareness of the present with predicaments. We have to be guided by our past. And you don't have to be a professor of history to take an interest in the past. For example, it is possible that Hitler had no knowledge of his past, and because it was not a Democrat by nature, he didn't listen to his lieutenants and his generals all the time. Napoleon, who lived roughly 100 years before him, made a significant military and political blunder when he attacked Russia. He attacked the wrong time of the year, and his army got caught by the Russian winter. And based on the information that is available, these soldiers were pulling, the time was not as modern as now. They're pulling these heavy military equipment, cumbersome and so on. And they just froze with guns in hand. They just froze. It was too much for them. Hitler came and made the same mistake. It is important to be guided by the past. So a knowledge of history is of paramount importance for all and sundry. Paramount importance for all and sundry. You're going to do your reflection and you're going to email me. Remember to study the definition, history definition I've given you, the one that I have said will be guiding this course. And so that you need to begin to talk like a historian and write like a historian. God bless you. Do your reflection and email me. I must get your reflection. I'm to get 36 reflection. And you're going to have 2 essays to do. God bless you.